25% of Americans volunteer every year. And of the 75% who don't volunteer, 90% of them say they want to, but they don't have the time. And so you can see that there's this interest and there's this knowing of how beneficial it is, but the ability to do that is a by their time is a hindrance. But for me, I like to say every other month I volunteer for my food pantry by going around for an hour and a half in my community and picking up bags from my neighbors' porches to deliver them for the food pantry. And that's what I do with my children.
Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome back to the And Both podcast. I am here today with Jenn Klein, who has a really cool business that I can't wait for her to tell you all about. She is the founder of You Are a Philanthropist, which I love the title of, and the book Giving is Selfish. So I wanted to say welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.
Yeah. So I would love to just, if you don't mind, introducing yourself and telling the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
So my name is Jenn Klein. I am the founder and CEO of You Are a Philanthropist and the author of Giving is Selfish that I published in October. And really my mission is to spread the awareness about the joy of giving and the health benefits of giving and how beneficial it is to give back to our families, our communities, and the greater world.
I love it. So when you say giving, are you talking about time, financial? Like, is it anything and everything, or is it specific?
For me, in my experience as a fundraiser in 20 years, I would call it anything and everything. But I do know that specifically in science, there's something called the helper's high. And that is when you give mostly of your time as a volunteer. So it can, volunteering can lower your blood pressure, can even help you live longer. And overall, you have better mental health benefits, better community connections. So I think it's something we don't talk enough about in our society. And I kind of found this niche because I was a mother for 8 years, but also wanting to stay in my career of fundraising. So I started exploring and blogging about giving, added a health coaching certification on top of that, and became really curious about talking to people who, through my podcast, You Are a Philanthropist, that were doing this charitable work and who are not being recognized and really seeing the value in what they were telling me, which is that it feels good to give, which is why I call my book Giving is Selfish. And Giving is Selfish is actually titled after something that Denzel Washington said in a commencement speech. I thought he was, I thought I misunderstood because I thought he said giving is selfless. That was something I had always believed on my own, that when you're giving, you're giving so much of yourself. But what I learned from him is that it feels really good to give. And of all the successes that he's had in his life, his ultimate success was really helping people through charitable foundations and volunteering.
I love that. So I like that too, that you talk about it being not just like a financial piece, although your background is in fundraising, that it's about time as well. Because I think that when you hear the word philanthropy or you hear about charitable acts or things along those lines that people think, well, if it's all financial. And so it's the idea that you are, time, like the time is money phrase, right? It's like, if you are not in a position to be doing these big things or little things, that your time is just as important or just as valuable to a cause or an organization or things like that. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's in my belief, it's just as you said. I think the society's definition of a philanthropist is somebody who can give millions. And for the average American, we're not able to attain that ability. But I want people to be really assured of what they are able to do and encouraged about what they can contribute. And that's why in my podcast, it's just people like myself who are giving to their local food pantry or giving back through their children's sports programs. So I think it's important to amplify those voices who are not recognized.
It's like the silent good deeds kind of thing of people that are really making it possible, the smaller tasks that are make it possible for these bigger wheels to keep turning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you are a mom.
I
This is
am.
this is how we found each other. And how old are your kids? How many kids do you have?
I have two boys, 8 and 6.
Okay. That's a busy age.
It is.
It is a busy age. So how do you do the things that you do alongside of having kids that I assume are in elementary school, and it's February and everyone is, various states of colds and all of that. So how do you find the time? How does it look like for you on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I tell people I don't watch TV anymore, which is flat out true. I spend the day working as a major gift officer for a Catholic school. Then I pick up my kids and watch them and take care of them for a few hours after school. And then after they go to bed, I'm working, my business. So this is a passion of mine and something I do late into the evenings because it's a joy for me. And usually when I do my volunteer work, either for the food pantry or for the sports activities my children are involved with, I'm able to bring my kids with me and have them involved as well, which is a nice way to show them about how important giving back is as well.
Yeah, I was going to say it's one thing to say like it's a really good thing to do this, but to be able to show and model that for your kids by having them come along with you, and for having them see, you have this goal in mind of writing a book, publishing a book. That's no small feat for sure. And then being able to see you go through the process of that as a great example.
Thank you. Yes, they are very excited about my book. They can't read it yet, but they love the fact that I wrote a book.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And so when did you start you are a philanthropist? How long has that been
I
going?
started blogging about 8 years ago when I left my fundraising job and became a full-time mom. And that just developed where people were curious about what I was doing. Someone recommended I do a podcast, which is how my podcast got started. And then I started the process of writing a book about a year and a half ago. So it just evolved, and I was getting feedback, positive feedback, and I just went with it.
Mhm. I love it. And it seems like everything has come through really organically. Like it's not like you hit the ground running, cuz too I think that people listening that are interested in starting something that is a passion project, or they are wanting to pursue something that it's still in its infancy in terms of like how they're thinking about it. It's like when you see when you look to someone else who started a business and it's like there's a podcast and there's a book and there's like that big list, it feels like this is the thing I have to do. But it's just like what you're saying about philanthropy and giving time, is that just start with a little bit and then build on it from there.
You are so right. It was definitely very organic, and it was exciting that people were responding to my message. And I just continued to have a growth mindset for myself and learn new things based on my conversations with with my guests on my podcast. And it's been really exciting to learn new perspectives of philanthropy. If your listeners were to tune into my podcast, there are some wonderful things that people say. There's a director of development who says he likes to activate generosity, and he doesn't see himself as pulling teeth to try to get people involved in the organization, but really inspiring people to get energized for what they can do with their time and money.
Yeah. And so have you, in the 8 years that you've been doing the blogging piece and really speaking about the importance of this, have you noticed changes in trends or trends in general, I guess?
The interesting thing that I learned was that a lot of the folks on my podcast had a role model that was really influential in their life. So it could be a parent, it could be a family friend, but they very specifically talked about someone who, when they were a child, really role modeled giving back in some capacity. And that was interesting to me. It wasn't something I had thought about, and it just goes back to show how important your role models, how important as mothers and parents we are as role models. And I find it exciting because it shows how important community is as well.
Yeah. When you're talking about that, I think about my aunt. I'm Canadian, so aunt. But she has volunteered for the Special Olympics in Canada for I don't even know how many years, but she did it, and she would bring her boys with her. And then, like as they're teenagers and then they get older and they're a part of it, and she's a part of it. And I wish I knew how long she's done it for, but it's just one of those things, like it's always a part of her day. On Saturday morning, it's swimming or bowling or whatever, part of a huge piece of her life. And it's been really cool because now she has grandchildren, and her grandchildren can go and see, and it's like when people have, I don't know, it's like when people have a hobby or a sport or whatever that family does. This is just like such a cornerstone piece of her life. And so she, through her own example for her children and then her grandchildren, and like has pulled friends in over the years to help and made great friends and things like that. So I mean, that's for me what I think of when you're talking about the process and how you just start with one person and then it'll fan out from there.
And I love the legacy that she can give to her own family and the impact that that's having. So when I became a mother, I started, and I wrote about this in my book, I started to kind of lose myself in service to my kids. And then I realized, wait a minute, I need to take care of myself too. And so I call it this giving scale. Like, you have to kind of balance your self-care with giving to others, because you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. And the work we do at home is so important as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. You've led us all the way down the pathway. We're walking next to each other. So when you talk about philanthropy and giving of time and things like that, how does that match up with a job like motherhood, where it is giving for so much of it? And so how do people who are, all encompassed in, usually I would say like the earlier phases of motherhood, where there's a lot of physical requirements and things like that. And then also too, as they get older, there's more of an emotional piece. How do you not define, how do you sort of rectify that with this job where there's so much external, and then giving as a way to fill the cup? Like, how does that mesh for you?
So for me, I think mothers are philanthropists. They're giving back to that next generation. They're putting their time, energy, passion into making the world a better place in their own homes. And so they're serving by cooking, cleaning, doing the dishes, running the errands, and it's so important and so undervalued. And I wish that society would, recognize that important work. And I think that's what I'm trying to do is really help mothers feel encouraged and empowered with what they are able to accomplish at home. And whether that be, you have a job outside of your home, whatever the right balance is for you, it's all motherhood is all encompassing. So there's no getting around the demands of it.
Right. Right. And then how do you balance how about balancing that with a partner to in order to free up that time to give back? How does that is that part of the thinking and philosophy as well?
So what I actually have men who are guests on my podcast as well, and I love hearing their stories. And I know that it's instrumental for them to be able to do community work if their partners are at home taking care of the inner work of their homes. So I really see philanthropy as if you're married or you have a relationship that you are, joined together in balancing the home and the community, because one of them has to be home and one of them has to be out and about or could be out and about. And so there is this important partnership in with your partner.
Yeah, yeah, because I've had a couple of guests on, and they talk about the notion of fair play and Eve Rodsky and that sort of more collaborative approach that has come out in courses and books and things like that over the year, and how that having the opportunity to take some of that stuff off of your plate would give you the opportunity to maybe pursue the time or to have the time to pursue something that does really help you give back in a way that's meaningful to you.
Absolutely. I think that's so important to remember that if we're home, we need to be doing good work. And if we have the capacity to give outside the home, which, is a challenge as well, but there's health benefits to it. So as we were talking about, so if you see it from a health perspective, that this is going to help me feel better about myself, this is going to energize me, this is going to help, you know, physiologically benefit myself as well.
To do stuff in the home or out of the home?
Well, I would say out of the home. In the home, I find very challenging for myself because it is a demanding job and you do need to balance your self-care in the home. For me personally, I find the homework harder than the community work.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody else feels that way.
I think there's a lot of people that would agree with that because it is such a thing that is central. Like it's a core, it's a lightning rod within ourselves. Cause I feel like when you're in the community, there's that separation where you can choose, and I say choose for lack of a better term, like there's a schedule or there's a starting and a stopping point. Whereas when you're home, I think every parent, no matter who you are, has said, I would like to stop for 5 minutes, or I would like to take the day off. And the people that you are saying that to are like, Mom, Dad, like that doesn't happen. And you're just like, no, just like 10 minutes, And so I think that I agree that being able to have much more clear boundaries around your time and your effort for me would be a lot easier than, someone's jumping on my bed at 5:30 in the morning.
I can identify with that. Yes.
Very strongly. Oh, I love it. So when you are thinking ahead to the future of this and where you would like this to go, I mean, your book is out. It's new. And so what direction, speaking of the organic growth, like what direction do you want this to trend towards?
So my mission, something that I learned in doing my own research is that 25% of Americans volunteer every year. And of the 75% who don't volunteer, 90% of them say they want to, but they don't have the time. And so you can see that there's this interest and there's this knowing of how beneficial it is, but the ability to do that is a by their time is a hindrance. But for me, I like to say every other month I volunteer for my food pantry by going around for an hour and a half in my community and picking up bags from my neighbors' porches to deliver them for the food pantry. And that's what I do with my children. And it's not that much of my time. And it's making an impact in the community. There's, dozens of other volunteers who are doing it on the same day. And we're bringing in thousands of pounds of donations in canned goods to the food pantry. So I get energized by something as simple as that. And I want people to know that there are opportunities out there. And I'm very curious, what more could we accomplish in the world if more of us were volunteering our time and more of us were able to perceive that there is the time in some capacity. And honestly, it's up to the nonprofits and the fundraisers out there to help people get involved too. We need to be as a nonprofit professional, we need to be creating those opportunities to help people get involved.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about it. It really sounds like so much of the work that you're doing is around reframing. So it's not like you're standing there saying nobody volunteers and everybody needs to volunteer, and like these are the very strict definitions of what it means to volunteer. You're saying, okay, so if you go to your food pantry and you do that, that doesn't mean that means that you've done that. And that's a clear way of saying I volunteered, right? There's an organization, they need help, you go help and you do that. But maybe if people have less of a constricted view on what counts as volunteering, then you start to open up the conversation around people, I guess I would say taking credit in a good way, not in a bad way, but like giving themselves credit for what they are doing on a day-to-day basis versus saying like, oh, I can't volunteer because I don't have that hour and a half, or I don't have that like Saturday morning or all of that. So therefore I can't volunteer. But they may very well be doing things along the way that are considered volunteering and just helping them understand that it doesn't all look one way.
You're absolutely right. And I just learned the other day on February 17th was Random Act of Kindness Day. And so there's another way where, we don't have to necessarily be joined with a nonprofit and working together. But if we're just practicing kindness on the social media, for example, or when we go out to the store, and I think those other unrecognized aspects of giving back should be amplified as well. And I've had guests on my show talk about those things because I do feel that is also a part of philanthropy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, it isn't all this A, B, or C. It's a lot of different things. And so so you are working now as a fundraiser. You said that's the day. And so
Yes.
you are elbow deep in the fundraising world and the philanthropy world.
Yes, I call it fundraising because I love it. It's fun.
Oh, that's awesome. And so outside of fundraising, outside of volunteering, all of those things, what do you do? What do you do for you outside of all of this?
That's a great question. I do have a monthly massage membership that I make sure I get my monthly massage, and I like to go for walks with my family. We're on vacation up here in Massachusetts for February break, and we did cross country skiing and snowshoeing. So I like to spend time with my family in the outdoors as well.
Yeah, that's nice. And then do you envision there being a time when you are a philanthropist becomes your 9 to 5? Is that the eventual?
Yes, that's
goal?
my dream. I really love sharing the message about how fun and rewarding and beneficial it is for ourselves, for our communities, for the world to be doing more philanthropic work.
Mm-hmm. And so if someone was saying, I would really like to get started with this, but I don't really know where to start. I feel like I don't have time. I feel like I don't even know where to begin. Like, where would you suggest that people look when when they want to get started with that? Sorry, that was a word salad.
That's such a great question. And I always say, start with what you're passionate about. So identify what areas am I skilled at? What areas am I most passionate about? So for me, I'm obviously skilled in fundraising, and I like to give to mental health organizations in some capacity, or poverty alleviation, food insecurity. And those are my main passion that I like to pursue. So it could be anything that you enjoy, seeing. I like to ask the question to my podcast guests, what's your vision for a better world? So if you could answer that question, you might be able to find what you would want to change in the world, and to make that difference yourself.
Yeah. And so would you suggest that people, like, if so they go through that exercise and they're like, I would like to, see change for animals, just because I feel like that's one that we can maybe sort of have a little bit of definition around. But I don't have the time, but I don't have this. Like, my kids are on break next week. So they had the SPCA, like the local animal shelter, come in, and they had kids brought in food and things like that. So is there an opportunity for these organizations like the SPCA or food pantries or things like that to participate in the education piece that you're talking about, like reframing it to try and bring people in as volunteers?
So a good nonprofit is never going to turn away a volunteer. So that's the good news,
Yep.
is fundraisers, development offices love to involve volunteers in any capacity. And I think it's just, they love it, particularly when you call out of the blue and say, I want to help you. That's really exciting for a nonprofit. And myself, last year, we fostered a puppy
Oh,
just for a couple weeks.
oh
And
my
it
God,
was
how could
so,
you?
it was so fun and rewarding, and it was a way that we could give back to an animal in need, and it was a good lesson. And we'll get a dog eventually, but it was just a fostering opportunity for us.
I I cannot. My kids have said this before, like, could we foster? And I'm like, no, because it's a one-way street. Like, you come in and then you stay forever.
A foster fail, they call it.
I am
Yes.
I would be the a poster for a foster fail. There'd be dogs, and there are already lots of kids, and it would just be like, "Mm, I can't. That is like, to me, that's one of those things that is like so incredibly generous in so many ways, because you have this, like, there's such an emotional lift when it comes to something like fostering in any way, shape, or form. And then there's like the emotional letting go, let down,
Yeah.
sadness, and all of that.
Yes, I'm very impressed with people who foster often. And it was very rewarding for me to be involved with a local nonprofit who was doing that work. I just learned so much about their volunteer program and how passionate their volunteers are and how dedicated they are. I'm very impressed with the fostering program for animals.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I love this statistic. I mean, I don't like the other end of it, but the one where people, when COVID was going on, that like animal shelters were empty because people were home, and so they were taking on, I mean, some of it has swung back the other way, unfortunately, but like that idea of having all of these animals have homes to go to, and people was a really nice feeling and to hear about and read about.
Absolutely. Yeah. when I saw those little puppy eyes on on Facebook, I was like, wow, that that little one's coming home with me. I didn't even tell my husband.
I was looking at one of those animal, the adoption shelter. They bring them up from the south, and it was this dog named Pog the dog. And I was on the phone, and then I told him after. I was like, "Hey, I called, but this dog was gone." And he's like, "What dog are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, we almost got a dog this week." He's like, "We already have a dog." I'm like, "Yes, but this dog was speaking to me through social media." And he was like, "No, I think it's time for you to put your phone down." I love it. So when you are thinking about ways to, like, would you ever do something in terms of like a matching platform or something like that, like where you have people that match with
Oh, yes.
organizations?
That's a great idea. I haven't looked into that myself, but I do know there are organizations out there that will do that. And I remember when I used to search job boards, they even have volunteer opportunities on there. So there are certainly those organizations who will help you match with a nonprofit, or you can even just look on job boards.
Yeah. Like, I wonder if there's, if you have people that are like, especially people that have really develop skill sets, if that is a way for them to be able to do something that's a little more structured, where you're saying, I don't have time, but like maybe there's an organization that wants an hour every other week or every month or whatever of someone to help them with that. And that's a way to find it. Just thinking of different ways for people to be able to find ways in that really align with what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. And actually, you know what? I'd like to tell your guests in the show notes about organization I can't think of off the top of my head that they could get started with.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I would love to have, just maybe some places to get started or things to look at for people, that are saying, okay, I would like to, or that, like you're saying, have wanted to do this for a very long time. And then it's one of those things that just sort of falls to the back of your mind with the lists and all of the things that are going on in the day-to-day side of living life these days. And so people have a place, like a jumping off point, as well as I would love for you to share all the information that you have in terms of like your book and your organization, so that we can link people there so that they can say, all right, I'm a philanthropist now. Like, I am putting on the hat and I'm going to do it.
Oh, I love that. That's my goal, is to get the societal definition out of people's heads and just get active and get involved in either in your home or in your community in some capacity that makes sense for you.
Yeah. Giving yourself credit, really. It's giving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we are so hard on ourselves. Like, it's that idea of like, I'm not doing enough, therefore it doesn't count. Like, it's like an all or none. Like, I either am giving hours and hours and hours of my time every week or every month, or it doesn't count. And what you're saying is like a little bit goes a long way.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. All right. Well, I will include all of the links in the show notes for everyone. And I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on today. I love the message that you're spreading in terms of getting people into these like good deeds, random acts of kindness, volunteer, all of those pieces. It's like, it's all equal. It's just, you got to get it where it makes sense for you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure to talk to you, and I'm eager if any of your listeners want to reach out to me, they can go to my website, youarephilanthropist.com, and I'm happy to help them as well. And we will link my resources in the show notes.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.